Today we are going to make chocolate chip cookies. One of the first things you want to do when you're making chocolate chip cookies is to gather all of your ingredients and supplies. First thing I grabbed was the gluten-free flour. And on the back of the flour is the recipe. So I need flour, sugar, packed brown sugar, baking soda, salt, chocolate chips, eggs, 2 sticks of butter, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I have sugar, flour, brown sugar, 2 eggs, salt, baking soda, chocolate chips, and vanilla. I went ahead and got out my pans and put parchment paper on all 3 cookie sheets. I started the oven at 350 degrees, just like the instructions called for. I have a bowl for my dry ingredients. I have a bowl for my wet ingredients. I have all of my measuring cups and spoons. I went ahead and measured out 2 sticks of butter and set them in front of the vent on the top of the stove so it can not melt, but soften the butter, because it called for softened butter. So when you're baking, you want to make sure you go ahead and get all of your supplies out. Now, some people like to go ahead and measure out everything before. I like to measure it out as I go. It's really a personal choice. So the first thing says preheat the oven to 350 degrees. I did that. Then it says we're going to stir together the gluten-free all-purpose flour, the sugar, the brown sugar, the baking soda, the salt, and the chocolate chips. Okay, let's start with the flour. Now, it doesn't say we have to put it in separate bowls, so I don't really need the smaller bowl, so I'm going to set that aside. So let's start with the flour. 2 1/4 cups of gluten-free all-purpose flour. So we're going to need to open this up. It's resealable, so I want to make sure I cut on the dotted line and not any lower. Cutting right where the scissor picture is. Now I'm doing this with one hand, so please be patient with me. All right, so I'm going to set the phone down just a second here. All right, I'm going to cut a little bit more because I didn't quite get it open. I'm looking for to open just above where the zip is to tie it, to zip it back closed. There we go. All right, so here's the flour. So it said 2 1/4 cups, correct? Yes, 2 1/4 cups. I want to get it full, but not over full. So there's 1 cup. Like I said, I'm doing this with one hand, so appreciate your patience. There's 2 cups. And here's 1/4 cup. So 2 full cups and 1/4 cup. Then it says to add sugar. We need 3/4 cup of sugar. So I take my 1/4 cup measuring cup and I measure out 1, 2, 'and just gently shake that off so I can make sure that it's level each time. 3. There's 3/4 cup of sugar. Then it says we need brown sugar. 3/4 cup packed brown sugar. Packed means you want to pack it down. You don't want it to be loose like the sugar was. So we're going to pack it down add a little bit more to that. There's one. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to open my new brown sugar here. There's not a whole lot left in that one. I'm going to need to open the new one. Get my scissors here. I think they need sharpened. There we go. I have it set up steady so that it doesn't dump over. I don't want to have to clean up brown sugar. It is not the funnest thing to clean up because it's very, very sticky. So I'm going to pour just a little bit into this container because it's already packed. The container I had in the refrigerator so that the brown sugar didn't get hard. All right, there's that. Okay, there we go. I can pack that easier now. So, if you remember, we only had 1/4 cup. That's where we left off as 1. Pack that down. Now, I did remember to wash my hands with soap and water before I started baking, so make sure you do the same. That's 2. You can use a spoon to pack it down, or you can use your fingers if they're clean. There's 3. So that's 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar. And then it says to add the baking soda. We need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So I'll go over here to my teaspoon. My baking soda is open. I'm going to reach in there and fill the spoon up. And the nice thing about baking soda and baking powder is that there's this nice straight edge right here. So if you overfill the spoon, like that, you can just take the straight edge and scrape off the extra. Voila, no shaking required. Okay, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I just kind of put my measuring spoons and cups wherever. Next it says salt and chocolate chips. We need 1 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to get I have a salt shaker, but it's not easy to measure salt out of a salt shaker. So I got that out just so you could see that I have salt. But I also have this container of salt right here. I'm just going to measure it out this way. That's so much easier than sitting there shaking out a whole teaspoon of salt. Now you can omit the salt, but it does add flavor to the cookies. So that's why I add it. And then the chocolate chips, 1½ cups. But you can add more if you really want to, and that's what I do. Sometimes I just dump in whatever I think I want. But for this purpose, since I am teaching you how to measure and bake, I'm going to measure them out. 1½ cups. So there's there's 1 cup, and look, there's like 3 pieces left in there, so I'm just gonna pour it all out. So there's 1 cup. What I had left in the bag, because I was snacking on them yesterday. And for the other ½ cup, I have another bag. I come prepared. Now that was dark, and this is regular. And this bag may not look familiar to you because I am dairy free. So these are dairy free chocolate chips, if you're wondering why they look different. I really miss eating the Toll House Nestle ones, but make do with whatever I got. And these actually taste pretty good. It's just mostly cocoa with a little bit of sugar. Okay, so they're very delicious. They're especially fun to snack on. So we've got a little mixture of mini and a little bit bigger. Get in there. I don't want to miss any. I love those chocolate chips. Okay, so we should probably stir now because it says stir together. So let's get a wooden spoon. There we go. It's a little one, but oops. I'm going to stir this all up. My butter is softening. I probably should pull it away from the heat though because it's going to melt and I don't want the glass to get too hot to touch. So I'm going to stir our sugar and our flour and our baking soda and our chocolate chips. Looks yummy. Cannot wait to eat chocolate chip cookies today. It's hard for me to bake chocolate chip cookies at my house because I am only one person, so I usually bake enough to share. But since I don't think we're really supposed to be sharing food right now, I'm probably going to put the most of this batch in the freezer, in the deep freezer, and I'm going to cover it up and hide it so that I forget about it until much later, because I don't want to sit and eat 3.5 dozen chocolate chip cookies all by myself. I don't think that's a good idea. Not very healthy. Okay, so let's see what's next. And it says to add the eggs, the butter, and the vanilla. Now, it doesn't say to add them in a different container, but I really do like to do that. So I still have my other container here, and I like to mix those wet ingredients all together before I add them to the dry ingredients. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. So I'm going to add the eggs. Here's the eggs. Now I have one hand, so let's see if I can crack this with one hand without getting any eggshell. Stuck my thumb in there to pull it apart. If you get eggshell, well, look, there's eggshell. That's okay. Just draining all that out. Just reach in there and grab it out of there. My hands are clean, so here we go. Come on. There we go. All right, there's another piece of eggshell. I don't normally get eggshell in my eggs, but this is another reason why I do it separately, because if I had broken that eggshell into the bowl that has the flour in it, then I would have had a more difficult time getting that eggshell out of the flour. So these are for another project later. I will tell you more about that later. Okay. I have egg all over my hands, so I really need to wash my hands because it's gross. All right. Let's see if I can do the other one without being as messy. So I'll need to crack it a little bit harder. There we go. Hey, we did it. Look at that. No eggshell in there. Still need to wash my hand though. All right, so this is for a planting exercise that I'm going to do with you guys later in a different video. I'll explain that later. Get that egg off my hand. Okay, now, so we have the eggs. We also need to add the butter and the vanilla. I'm going to need a whip. Stir all this up. There's our butter, 1 cup of butter. I already pre-measured that out, so the video wouldn't be too long. All right, and then the vanilla, I think it's 1 teaspoon. Yes, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So we got the vanilla here. I did not pre-measure that out because I didn't want to accidentally dump it. So it's not too many places you can keep a teaspoon of vanilla and leave it sitting there. Besides, I had to use the spoon for other things. I only have 1 teaspoon. I need to get some more. Let's measure out 1 teaspoon of vanilla. A little bit of a mess, but that's okay. There we go. All right. I'll clean that up in just a minute. Once I get the cookies in the oven, then I'll do a little bit of pre-cleanup. Gives me something to do while I'm waiting. All right, so we're going to mix all this together. By having the butter softened, it makes it easier to mix with everything. Because if the butter's hard, then it's not going to mix easily. Maybe it could have been a little bit softer, but I didn't want it melted. There we go, getting that all mixed up. It's smooth. It's mixing a little bit easier now. Some of the heat from the butter that did actually get melted is mixing in with everything, and there we go. That's solidifying, thank goodness. I would do that if it was cold. Okay, so that's enough of that. Everything's mixed in. And now we're going to mix the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients, just like it said to. Now, if I had another hand, I would probably scrape that down. But I'm not missing too much, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to need that again, and I'm not going to need that again. So now we want to mix all this together. Thankfully, I can hold the bowl with my pinky finger while I'm holding the phone. Let's see here. All mixed in and nice and soft and wet. We don't want anything left dry. So this may take a couple minutes to mix in. I want to mix until all the ingredients are completely and thoroughly mixed together. Until it all looks wet. You know, right now it still looks a little dry. I can still see the flour and the sugar. So I'm going to keep mixing. And what you may need to do is hold the bowl with one hand and stir quickly and aggressively with the other hand. If you don't stir quickly and aggressively, you're going to be here all day stirring. So give me just a moment. I'm going to pause the video and stir this up and show you what it looks like after it's thoroughly mixed. Okay, so I have everything thoroughly and completely mixed. You'll know that it's well mixed when it sticks together and forms a clump. And there's no more like powdery or sandy looking flour and sugar in there. So everything looks compact, it looks sticky, it's staying together. When it stays together and doesn't fall apart, then you'll know that it's fully and completely mixed. So it took me a good 3 or 4 minutes to get all that completely mixed. And now it's real sticky. Wow, that looks good. All right, so the next step, it says, scoop dough by rounded 2 tablespoons and place 2 inches apart onto ungreased cookie sheet. Flatten lightly. All right, so we can do that. Something I like to do actually is to wear gloves and shape it with my hands. So I think I might, but I can't do that because I'm holding a camera. So I'll follow the direction, go get a spoon. I said 2 tablespoons. I mean, technically I could use this tablespoon, which I might do since that's an actual tablespoon. So if I take 1, 2, said rounded, so I'm going to make it a little bit round. And then it said flatten it slightly. Oh, buddy, that's going to make a nice big cookie. So if you don't want real big cookies, you can just do 1 tablespoon. And I think serving size wise, that's what I'd rather have. So it's really up to you. I'll make a few big ones and a few little ones. Like if I want a small snack, I'll have a little cookie. If I want a dessert, I'll eat a big cookie. It's all going to take the same amount of time to cook or to bake regardless. So then you're just going to do this for until you have 12 cookies on this sheet because they're 2 inches apart. So this is about 2 inches. So let's just scoot this one over just a little bit. You can just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be exact or perfect. If they stick together, that's fine. It just wants you to know that they are going to need room to expand when they're baking. So if I get just a little bit more than a tablespoon, then I have it. It's not too big and it's not too small. So I think what you should put on here really is just the size of cookie that you actually want to eat. So I'm going to do just a little bit bigger than a tablespoon, not quite 2. About like that. That looks like the right size cookie for me, for my portion size. You can make the size cookie that you want for your portion size. And you just keep doing this until you have 12 cookies on the cookie sheet. There's a stray chocolate chip. Stick that stray chocolate chip right there. I like to have a good chocolate chip to bite ratio. If there's a bite without a chocolate chip, it's disappointing. All right, here we go. Make it round first before you flatten it out. That way you get a good, nice size cookie. Like I said, I'd do this a lot faster if I had 2 hands, but that's okay. This works. This is fun, actually. Just keep doing that. My oven is preheated already. I can tell it just kicked back on again. So the oven is ready for the cookies to go in as soon as I get them on the tray. I'm not going to sit here and make all 3.5 dozen on the video. I just want to give you the gist of the idea of how to bake the cookies, what the process looks like, and then I'll show you what they look like when they come out of the oven. Oh, they are going to be gooey, gooey, and warm. I cannot wait. And I like my chocolate chip cookies with chocolate milk. I don't know about you, but some people eat their chocolate chip cookies with ice cream. And some people just eat them without anything to drink. But I don't know how you can eat cookies without something to drink, because it makes you thirsty. All right. So I'm going to do this on 3 cookie sheets. This is the first one, okay? And it says make 3.5 dozen. So how many are in a dozen? How many cookies are in 1 dozen? I'll give you a second to think about that. 1 dozen. That's right. There are 12 cookies in a dozen. So if this makes 3.5 dozen, this recipe makes 3.5 dozen, how many cookies are we going to have all together? I'll give you a second to do the math. And if you did 12 times 3 equals 36, you are correct. But it said 3.5 dozen. So we want to add, what's half a dozen? How many are in half a dozen? Oh, I'm going to make this little bitty guy a little bit bigger. A half a dozen is 6. So if a dozen is 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A half a dozen is half of 12, which is 6. So if we do 12 times 3, 12 are in a dozen, times 3 dozen, that's 36 cookies, plus a half a dozen, so we add 6 more cookies. 36 plus 6 equals, that's right, you got it, 42. Okay, I'm trying to make all my cookies look a little bit the same size. Like I said, really, you can just eyeball it. Those look really, really good. Okay, so I'm going to put them in the oven. Let me wash my hand first. Ugh. I don't lick my fingers. You really should not eat the cookie dough because the eggs and the flour are uncooked. They do make cooked cookie dough in the store. It comes with pre-cooked flour and eggs so that you don't get salmonella poisoning. So I do not recommend, but you know, it's your house. You can do what you want. I probably will take a bite. I don't know. I'm just saying you probably shouldn't. All right. So we're going to set those in the center of the oven. Close the lid. And it says to bake for 10 to 11 minutes or until the edges are light golden brown. Cool for 5 minutes and remove from the cookie sheet. I'm going to I'm going to remove them from the cookie sheet when they're done and put them on this cooling rack before I put the next set or next batch in. And then store them in a cooled, airtight container. So I'll be back when that is done. I'm going to go set my timer. And we'll see what they look like when they come out of the oven. See you in about 10 to 11 minutes. Okay, just to let you know what I was doing while I was waiting for the timer to go off, and I still have 1 more minute, I went ahead and took the cookie dough and filled up my next 2 cookie sheets. There's 1. And I didn't want to keep the other one in front of the heat, so I put it in the refrigerator right there. So it's ready to go. I cleaned up my mess, and I put away all of my supplies. So now I just have to wait for the timer to go off and take out my cookies. So be back in 30 seconds. Okay, the timer's gone off, so I'm going to open the oven very carefully because it is very hot. I'm going to grab an oven mitt. And I'm going to gently pull the oven rack out, not too far, and look at my cookies. What we want to see is brown around the edges. And I can tell with my eyes that the edges are a little bit brown. but I'm not quite sure if the cookies are quite done. So what I want to do is get a spatula out of the drawer. And if I can move the cookie without it falling apart, maybe even look underneath it a little bit and see that it's brown, and the cookies are done. If I wait for them to get hard, they're going to be crispy, and I don't like my chocolate chip cookies to be crispy because then they're overdone. I like them to be a little bit chewy. So if you want to wait 1 more minute for them to be a little bit more brown, you may do so, but I'm going to take mine out right now. Now, I'm going to grab the other cookie sheet here, slide that right in. Since it only takes about 11 minutes, I'm just baking them one at a time. If I put both of them in there, it may take a little bit longer. And I'm going to set my timer for 11 minutes. Actually, I think that stayed in for 12, so I'm going to set my timer for 12 minutes. And when these are cooled off, I will put them on the cooling rack. And I put it in the freezer so it stay nice and cold, because you want your cookies, even though they're warm, you want them to cool off before you eat them. So I put my cooling rack in the freezer, and I'm going to gently slide my cookies onto the cooling rack. Oh, that one just a little bit. That's okay. There we go. If you have to use 2 hands, that's fine. But if you're a little bit of an expert baker like me, you know how to quickly slide that spatula under there and get the cookie off the cookie sheet without using 2 hands. Scoot those over just a tad. There we go. Oh, these are perfect. I cannot wait to sink my teeth into one of these chocolate chip cookies. Oh, my mouth is watering right now. I bet yours is too. And now that you've seen this video and how easy it is to bake chocolate chip cookies, I bet you can't wait to bake your own and sink your teeth into, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 cookies. Not quite sure what the serving size is, but I think I'm probably going to have 3 or 4 because these look yummy. But the other 2 dozen, those will get frozen. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. I'm going to put the rest of these on this sheet and bake the other 6. And that puts me at 42 cookies. So, there you go. Chocolate chip cookies. Have fun.